Welcome to NapChat, our regular National Advisory Panel podcast where we chat about homelessness and multiple disadvantage, including trauma, mental illness, domestic abuse and addiction. We recognise that we've all been on our own unique journeys and none of us have a monopoly on the truth, just our own. This podcast carries a warning. We may discuss things that are distressful or triggering and you should listen to it at your own discretion.
This month on NapChat, we're going to be talking about the cost of living crisis, so how that's affecting people at an individual level, and especially we're going to be looking at people perhaps experiencing homelessness at the moment, but then also looking at how it's affecting things like council budgets and the implications that has for the services that are available to everybody. So we're going to throw it open now to the NAP forum to firstly start to think about how it's affecting kind of people at an individual level.
A lot of the people who are getting out of homelessness, the cost of what they can get with the universal credit housing benefit and so on puts them into a category of housing that is often in very, very bad condition. And although the government's talking about upgrading the housing in the country, until that happens, people are having to live with places that the windows don't close properly. There is inadequate insulation by any standard. And of course, that is putting the cost up. And the irony of the life we're living is that the people who can least afford the cost of heating are those who've got the worst conditions in which to keep a home. And so it's a sort of double negative, which is really impacting people. And the impact is not just simply financial. That is in itself a big issue, but it's the worry upon worry upon worry affects people's mental health. And the sort of things that a person who is fortunate enough to have sufficient funds can do is, I'll just bump up the heating, I'll cook something special. Those sort of little treating yourself nicely is often impossible for people in bad financial conditions. And so they're not just their quality of life, but their ability to experience a good life, to actually live and not exist, as one person I know put it. That is very, very difficult for people.
Yeah, I know for me that I've been struggling, but the way that I've made things work, so I shop, well, it's not shopping, but it's free, an app called Olio. So they'll go and collect food from Tesco's and then you'll pick it up, but it's different. You can't just have what you want. You have to take what's on offer and things like that because it is difficult. And yeah, just making sure the children have got things, but like sometimes I won't have things, but
papers are full of the fact that the energy companies are going to people who are comparatively well off, but are struggling to meet their bills in respect of energy supply, and are just being forcibly put onto prepayment meters. And a lot of those people are actually relatively better off than the homeless community. So if you are struggling literally to work out what you're going to do with the spare £10 you've got on you, as to get energy or to get food, but you can't afford both, or to have a wash, people down to having a proper shower once a week, or going, if they can, to a local facility that offers that. So I think there is a real issue there. People have got to come up with the money up front. They've got to have the money in the first place to come up with it. And then on top of that, there's the issue that not everybody is next to a place where they can recharge their prepayment meters. A lot of people may be living a significant distance away. You take the cold weather we've had at the moment, it's affected some parts of the country very, very badly. And imagine you're sitting there, the place has got colder and colder during the day, you're trying to struggle through, you run out, you've got to go out in those conditions, your health may not be good, you're certainly not going to get any better. And if you've got rain in icy conditions, that's going to be even worse, because when you come back, you've got wet clothing, you've got to think, can I afford to actually dry it out? I mean, that is a question that a lot of people, fortunately, don't have to face. But when you're faced with the question of, can I afford the money to dry my clothes out, so that, and it's the same with damping housing and that sort of thing. So yes, these are very important issues, not only for the homeless, but also for the country, because if people start getting illnesses, respiratory illnesses, for example, they are end up, this is perhaps not the right word, I can't think of the right word at the moment, but clogging up the health service. So, these issues are, pretty serious.
Yeah, so just on the back of that, you can register for priority services with your energy company. And then it means, like, if you've got children, or say you've got medication that needs to be in the fridge, or you've got mental health issues, or whatever it is, if you get either accidentally cut off, like there's just a power cut, and your priority to get back on. And I think it also means that if you're not able to top up, they can't cut you off. And that's same with water and stuff as well. And if you register for the water priority services, you also get 50% discount on your water bill, which is obviously a massive help. But it's worth knowing that, like, you can register for these things, and actually the threshold is quite wide. So yeah, it might just be a helpful thing.
Tariff on the prepayment is higher. The only advantage of prepayment, not an advantage, is if you run out of electricity, you've got an emergency supply. I mean, I've used it many times in the past, right? The prepayment. I owed British Gas a bill. I wasn't paying the bill. So they said, put in a smart meter. It cleared the debt in no time at all. But still, when I moved into the place before the hospital, I got a tariff. And that's what I plan to do now.
And how about things like heating and stuff like that? Are there any challenges there?
Yeah, I think when looking at the question of cost of living, it's important to understand that there are, even within the homeless community, or those people who are just moving out of homelessness, people can be in entirely different financial situations. Because if you look at one end, you've got people who are on basic universal credit that don't qualify or haven't managed to obtain PIP or the higher level of universal credit. They are on a very, very tight budget. Whereas if you're fortunate enough to be in supported housing and you qualify medically across the board for the high level of universal credit and PIP, you're in comparative terms fairly well off. So I think one of the things that people need to be aware of is they may see one homeless person in their community and say, well, that person's coping okay. Why is the person next door not coping okay? And we need to realize that big difference between the people who get the maximum awards and the people who are on the absolute basic.
I just want actually just going to follow up on a bit about, you said about kind of the types of accommodation. Have you got any more kind of examples of the quality, and the standard of the housing that people sometimes get rehoused into?
When we're looking at the quality of those accommodations, how is realistically someone supposed to make a go of it, make a realistic go of their new life, their new home, which the local authority will make out that they've all done, when there's no carpet, it's mouldy, it's fallen apart, it's just plaster, it's not painted, there's no facilities, there's no anything. How is that person supposed to take pride in their home? How are they supposed to, want to look after it and feel at home when it's in such bad state? And this is such a small example of this, but I had a leak in my kitchen. Now, where I've not been able to have the heating on 24/7 and it's been cold, there's mouldy patches. Now that's patches, it's wipeable, it's fixable, but because they haven't fixed the leak, I'm like, well, what's the point? What is the point of me trying to put in this effort over and over again, getting my friend round to come paint it and doing all of this when actually they don't care? And I just think it's a punishment in itself. You've gone through the whole process, you've made a homelessness application, you've finally got the keys to your front door, your space, you're working with other support services if needed, and then you're kicked with a badly stated property that is mouldy and is potentially in an antisocial area or whatever it might be. How much further can you kick a person? Like, not only can they afford that horrible place, but they can't make a go of it. And I think, it's just it feels like a punishment because, you're not able to work and earn 50 grand a year or whatever to have that sort of life that you might see other people leading.
Well, I've not actually been unlucky enough to see some of this, but there's a guy I knew when in the local hostel, and he was a guy who, was a young guy, very streetwise, and he said, I would rather go back on the street than live in some of those places. He said, you need to take in a load of bin bags just to clear the rubbish out. And both this gentleman and several others I've met have said, if in decent weather, these places are black with mold, which is the usual obvious one, I'm definitely not going to walk into such a bad place. And I think it's fair and reasonable that people shouldn't be forced into those conditions. And tragically, we've heard about the respiratory problems that have actually literally taken the lives of people over this last few months. And when you consider that often the worst landlords are associated with these conditions, you can't complain. You start saying, well, my fridge is broken down. Okay, go. We want you out of here. And so the next person comes and they've still got the same broken fridge. And when you've got some bad landlords out there who can behave like that, or at the other extreme, you've got landlords who would otherwise be okay, for example, local councils and things, they are often in the situation that they've cut back on their staff so much and their administration is in such a bad condition. Even when they want to try and do something, they haven't got the budget, they haven't got the time, they haven't got the system. So you're left struggling. And all these things are just building the pressures on people.
Really kind of quite short-sighted sort of savings lead to quite these huge detrimental costs. So really skimping on the quality of the accommodation that's being provided is now really making the situation a lot worse. That we've now got a situation where costs are loads higher because the quality is so poor, and that's a huge cost to the individual, to the area, and to us as a country. And that we really need to be thinking these things forward from the beginning and making sure that we understand the implications of, well, if you're going to have really cheap quality housing, then if these sort of things happen, this is the cost for it all, and need to be baking that into the decision making and speaking to people who understand what life is going to be like if these sort of policies are enacted, and can really help kind of implement them in a better way that's going to be better for everyone in the long run.
We're at a time where we need to start helping people up, whether that's through advocacy or through statutory duties or through advice or support, instead of bringing people down and punishing people and taking stuff away and viewing it like that. We need to start bringing people up, and as a society making sure that people's rights, people's needs and people's adjustments are being met, and ideally without discrimination and without prejudice, and in a kind, compassionate way as well.
We hope you enjoyed this Snapchat. Like and subscribe to make sure you never miss an episode and keep up to date.